My grandson yelled, "Grandma, apologize to my dog right now, or get out of my house." I stood up and looked straight into his eyes. He smirked like he'd already won. I said only 3 words and left. 2 weeks later, he was banging on my door, desperate. "I'm glad to have you here." I never thought my own grandson would choose a dog over me. The October afternoon sun streamed through Otto's floor-to-ceiling windows as I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to his trendy downtown apartment. At 66, those steps weren't getting any easier. But I'd made this journey every other Sunday for the past 2 years. It was our tradition, or at least it used to be. I knocked softly on the heavy wooden door, already hearing Buster's high-pitched yapping from inside. That little white Maltese had more energy than a toddler on sugar, and about as much sense. The door swung open, and there stood Otto, my 22-year-old grandson, looking annoyed before he even saw me. "Oh, hey, Grandma Teresa." His tone was flat, distracted. He stepped aside to let me in, but I could tell his heart wasn't in it. "Hello, sweetheart." I kissed his cheek, noticing how he barely bent down to accommodate my height anymore. "How was your week?"
Busy.
"Work's been crazy." He was already walking toward his kitchen, leaving me standing in the entryway like a stranger. The apartment always made me feel out of place. Everything was so modern, so cold. Gray walls, black furniture, strange light fixtures like metal spiders hanging from the ceiling. Not a single family photo anywhere. The only warmth came from that ridiculous little dog who was spinning in circles on the white leather couch. "I brought you some of those chocolate chip cookies you used to love," I said, holding up the tin container I'd spent the morning preparing. "The ones with pecans?" Otto barely glanced at it. "Thanks. Just put them on the counter." I set the tin down carefully, trying not to let his indifference sting. This wasn't the same boy who used to run to my house every day after school, begging me to teach him how to bake, calling me his best friend. That boy had disappeared, replaced by this distant stranger who treated me like an obligation. Buster jumped down from the couch and trotted over to investigate me. I reached down to pet him, but as I shifted my weight, my foot accidentally bumped his tiny paw. The dog yelped, more in surprise than pain, and skittered backward. "Grandma." Otto's voice exploded across the room. "What the hell?" I looked up, startled by the fury in his face. "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean. You need to apologize to Buster right now." I blinked, certain I'd misunderstood. "Excuse me? You stepped on him. He could have been seriously hurt. You need to apologize to him right now, or get out of my house." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there in his pristine living room. I had changed his diapers, walked him to school, saved every dollar to buy him the bicycle he wanted for his 10th birthday, and now he was demanding I apologize to a dog. "Otto," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "You're asking me to apologize to a dog?"
Yes.
"Buster is family to me. He's more important than." He caught himself, but the damage was done. "More important than me." I looked at my grandson. When had he become this person? When had I become so disposable to him, the boy I'd raised during countless summers, who I'd supported through every scraped knee and broken heart, was now treating me like I was less valuable than a tiny fur ball. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Buster had stopped whimpering and was wagging his tail, oblivious to the tension. Otto held him tighter, jaw set in stubborn defiance. I could have argued. I could have reminded him of everything I'd done, every sacrifice I'd made. I could have pointed out the hypocrisy of demanding respect for a dog while showing none to his own grandmother. I could have fought, but I didn't. Instead, I reached for my purse, adjusted the strap over my shoulder, and looked Otto directly in the eyes. Those eyes that used to light up when he saw me, that used to beg for one more story, one more cookie, one more hug. "All right, Otto," I said quietly. Just 3 words, but with something final in my voice. He must have sensed it because his expression shifted slightly. "Grandma, I just—" "No need to explain, sweetheart." I kept my voice gentle, almost serene. I understood perfectly. I turned toward the door, movements deliberate. Behind me, I heard Otto clear his throat. "So, are you going to apologize to Buster or what?" I paused with my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Goodbye, Otto. The door clicked shut with soft finality. I stood for a moment, listening to muffled sounds from inside, Otto's footsteps, the dog's renewed yapping, the distant hum of his sound system. Then I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. Floors counting down, 3, 2, 1. I felt something unexpected settle over me. Not heartbreak, though there would be some later. Not anger, though that was there, too. Something else entirely. Clarity. For 22 years, I'd watched Otto grow up believing love meant never facing consequences. His parents, Sarah and East, had made sure of that. They gave him everything he wanted, no questions asked. They taught him that his comfort mattered more than others' feelings, that his wants trumped everyone else's needs. And I'd been complicit. I'd made excuses, covered for him, loved him unconditionally, even when he showed me none in return. But standing in that elevator, descending away from the grandson who chose a dog over his grandmother, I realized what should have been obvious years ago. Otto had learned exactly what his parents taught him. Teresa, good old reliable Grandma Teresa, would always be there. That I had no value beyond what I could provide. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. I walked out into the crisp October air. My small sedan sat in the visitor parking space, the same spot I'd used dozens of times before, but this felt different. This felt like the last time. As I drove home to my modest duplex across town, I thought about the envelope in my bedroom closet, the one I'd been carrying for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. The one that would change everything for Otto if he only knew what it contained. But Otto had made his choice today. He'd shown me exactly where I ranked in his list of priorities, somewhere below a spoiled Maltese who spent most of his day sleeping on designer furniture. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, watching the wind blow the first fallen leaves across my small front yard. In 2 weeks, Otto would come looking for me. Not because he missed me, not because he realized his mistake, but because he would finally need what the envelope contained. By then, it might be too late for apologies, even the ones meant for humans. The silence in my house felt different after that Sunday. I sat at my kitchen table the next morning, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold while staring at the empty chair across from me. That's where Otto used to sit during our weekend visits, back when he was small enough to need a booster seat. Back when spending time with Grandma Teresa was the highlight of his week. The tin of chocolate chip cookies sat unopened on the counter, a reminder of yesterday's humiliation. I'd spent 3 hours making those cookies, the same recipe I'd used since he was 5. The same recipe his mother, Soraya, had declared too fattening when Otto turned 12, around the time she decided I was becoming too influential in his life. I should have seen the signs then, but like most grandmothers, I thought love would be enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Soraya. Mom called and said, "You upset Otto yesterday. Maybe it's time to give him some space to grow up." I stared at the message, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. Soraya never called me Mom. It was always Teresa, or, when she wanted to manipulate me, she used Mom. I deleted the message without responding. The truth was, I'd been giving Otto space for years. Every time Sia decided I was overstepping, every time East made some comment about boundaries, I'd stepped back. I'd watched from a distance as they filled Otto's world with expensive gadgets and designer clothes, teaching him that love came with a price tag, that people were disposable when they stopped being useful. And I'd stayed quiet, playing the role of the grateful grandmother, happy for whatever crumbs of attention they threw my way. Walking to my bedroom, I opened the closet door and pushed aside the winter coats I rarely wore. Behind them sat a small fireproof safe, the kind you buy at any office supply store. Inside, along with my birth certificate and social security card, was the envelope I'd been waiting 3 years to open. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. The envelope was thick, cream-colored paper with my name written across the front in my brother Harold's careful handwriting. Harold had died of a heart attack at 78, leaving behind no wife, no children, and a fortune that would have surprised anyone who knew his modest lifestyle. Harold had been the quiet one in our family, the brother who worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years and lived in the same small house our father had left him. What none of us knew, what even I hadn't suspected until the lawyer contacted me, was that Harold had been investing every spare penny for 5 decades. He bought IBM stock in 1962. He purchased real estate in neighborhoods everyone else had written off. He lived on $20,000 a year, while his portfolio grew to numbers that still made my head spin. $2,400,000. All of it was left to Otto, with one very specific condition. I had to oversee the inheritance until Otto turned 25. Harold had been crystal clear in his will. He had watched Otto grow up, seen how Soraya and Easton spoiled him, and worried about what would happen if that much money fell into unprepared hands. Teresa is the only one in this family with sense, he'd written in his letter to me. She'll know when the boy is ready, if he's ready. For 3 years, I'd kept the secret. Through Otto's college graduation, through his first job, through all the family gatherings where Soraya made subtle digs about my limited finances. I'd watched them struggle with credit card debt while sitting on the power to change Otto's life forever. But Harold had been smart. The inheritance came with strings attached. Otto couldn't just blow through the money on cars and vacations. The funds would be released in stages, with the largest portion, $1,800,000, only becoming available if Otto could demonstrate financial responsibility and respect for family values by age 25. I was the sole judge of whether he'd met those criteria. Yesterday, when Otto had demanded I apologize to a dog, I realized something that should have been obvious long ago. The boy Harold had worried about, the one who needed time to mature, hadn't grown up at all. If anything, he'd gotten worse. The kitchen timer went off, pulling me from my thoughts. I'd put a pot roast in the slow cooker this morning, more from habit than hunger. Otto used to beg me to make pot roast every time he visited. It's better than any restaurant, Grandma, he'd say, helping himself to thirds. Now I was cooking for one, the way I had been for months. I sealed the envelope back in the safe, but something made me pause. Next to Harold's letter was another document I'd almost forgotten about. The power of attorney Harold had insisted I sign before his death. It gave me access to a safety deposit box at First National Bank, one I'd never opened. Just in case, Harold had said mysteriously, Teresa, there might come a time when you need more than just words to make them listen. I'd never understood what he meant. But as I sat in my empty kitchen, listening to the silence where Otto's laughter used to be, I began to wonder if my brother had seen something coming that I'd missed. The afternoon stretched ahead of me, long and quiet. No phone calls from Otto asking about weekend plans. No impromptu visits where he'd raid my refrigerator and tell me about his week. Just silence and the weight of decisions I wasn't ready to make. But Harold's words echoed in my memory. She'll know when the boy is ready, if he's ready. For the first time in 3 years, I realized that If was doing a lot of heavy lifting. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. Hello, Mrs. Valdez. This is Jonathan Morrison from Morrison Keller and Associates. We handled your brother's estate. My pulse quickened. Yes, I remember. Is something wrong? Not wrong exactly, but I wanted to inform you that we've received some inquiries about Mr. Morrison's estate. It seems someone has been asking questions about the inheritance provisions. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of questions? Well, that's what's interesting. The inquiries came from a Mr. Easton Valdez, claiming to be conducting financial planning for the family. He seemed particularly interested in the timeline for disbursement and the conditions attached to the inheritance. Easton, Otto's father, the man who'd never shown interest in Harold while he was alive, who'd barely attended the funeral, was suddenly curious about Harold's money. What did you tell him? I asked. Nothing, of course. Attorney-client privilege. But Mrs. Valdez, I think you should know he seemed to have some inside information about the inheritance amount. That suggests someone close to the situation may have shared details they shouldn't have. After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone, pieces clicking together in my mind. Easton's sudden interest in Harold's estate. Soraya's text about giving Otto space. The way Otto had been treating me lately, like I was an inconvenience rather than family. They knew somehow they'd found out about the inheritance and were positioning themselves to influence Otto's relationship with me. They wanted me out of the picture so they could control the money without interference. The beautiful irony was that they had no idea I was the one thing standing between Otto and his inheritance. They were trying to eliminate the very person their plan depended on. I walked to the window and looked out at my small garden, where the roses Harold had helped me plant 5 years ago were still blooming despite the October chill. He'd known this day would come. He'd prepared for it in ways I was only beginning to understand. "You always were the smart one," I whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow, I decided I would pay a visit to First National Bank. It was time to see what else my brother had left me in that safety deposit box. Something told me I was going to need every advantage I could get. Because if Soraya and Easton thought they could use their son to push me aside and claim Harold's fortune, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I may have been just a grandmother to them, easily dismissed and taken for granted, but I was also Harold's sister. He'd trusted me with more power than they could imagine. Soon, they would understand that their biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was teaching their son to do the same. 2 weeks passed in blessed silence. No phone calls demanding explanations. No guilt-laden texts about family obligations. No unexpected visits where I had to pretend being treated like a second-class citizen in my own grandson's life was acceptable. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. I'd made my visit to First National Bank 3 days after that disastrous Sunday. What I found in Harold's safety deposit box took my breath away. Not just additional documents about the inheritance, but detailed records of every conversation Harold had witnessed between Soraya, Easton, and Otto about me over the past 5 years. My brother had been keeping notes about how they discussed my declining mental state when I forgot Otto's 21st birthday, about their plan to gradually reduce my involvement in Otto's life so the transition would be easier when I became too much of a burden. Harold had seen it all and prepared accordingly. But I hadn't expected Otto to figure out the inheritance this soon. The pounding on my front door started at 7:30 on a Wednesday evening. Not a polite knock. Not the doorbell. Actual pounding, like someone was trying to break it down. I set down my tea and walked slowly to the window, peering through the blinds. Otto's Honda Civic sat in my driveway, parked at an angle suggesting he'd been in a considerable hurry. The pounding continued, accompanied now by his voice. "Grandma Teresa, I know you're in there. Please, I need to talk to you." I considered ignoring him. Part of me wanted to let him stand out there and feel what it was like to be dismissed, to have your needs considered unimportant. But curiosity won. I opened the door. The sight that greeted me was not what I expected. Otto looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His clothes wrinkled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands were shaking. "Grandma," he said, voice cracking like he was 12 again. "Thank God you answered." I stood in the doorway, not moving aside. "Otto, what brings you by? Can I come in, please? I need to talk to you about something important." "Is Buster with you?" I asked mildly. He blinked, confused. "What?" "No, he's at home." "Why would?" Then understanding dawned. He looked ashamed. "Grandma, about that day, the day you chose your dog over your grandmother?" "Yes, I remember it quite clearly." Otto's face crumpled. "I was an idiot. I know that now. Please, can I just come in? 5 minutes. That's all I need." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Otto practically tumbled through the doorway, relief palpable. We sat in my living room, the same room where he'd spent countless afternoons building pillow forts and begging for stories. Now he perched on the edge of my old sofa, like he was afraid it might collapse beneath him, watched him fumble with his phone, his fingers trembling. "It's all here, Grandma. Everything about the inheritance, about Uncle Harold's plans." I didn't know what to do. I gestured for him to sit fully on the sofa, though he barely moved, as if afraid I'd vanish again. "Otto, slow down. Start from the beginning." He swallowed hard, blinking against the tears threatening to spill. "I found some messages. From Dad. From Mom. They've been talking about Harold's estate, about you, about me. They know something you didn't tell them." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It made sense. The call from the attorney, Easton's sudden curiosity, Soraya's manipulative text, it all connected. And what did you think you were going to do with that information? I asked softly. I didn't want to believe it at first, he admitted. I thought maybe I was imagining it. But then I saw more. I saw how they've been trying to control me. How they've been trying to push you away. And I realized I couldn't let them do it. I leaned back slightly, watching him. For a moment, I didn't speak. The Otto sitting in front of me was vulnerable, shaken, but sincere in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. The boy who demanded I apologize to a dog, the arrogant,